This incompetent person will finally humiliate herself. Once this transaction is complete, I'm finished working with her. I gazed at the text message illuminated on Miles's tablet display, my coffee cooling in my grasp. Those words struck me like frozen water through my bloodstream. Half a year. 6 complete months I had dedicated my essence, spirit, and every conscious hour to preparing for the upcoming pitch session with Gravora Group. The agreement that would determine the fate of our consulting company, Thornland Analytics. I am Joanna Wilkes, and throughout the previous 8 years, I have been constructing something I believed belonged to both of us. Miles and I established this enterprise together in Portland, Oregon, laboring 16-hour shifts from our tiny apartment, surviving on quick noodles and resolve. I served as the planner, the person who developed our proposals and displays. He functioned as the smooth talker, the personality that customers adored. At least, that was my assumption. The tablet had been resting on our kitchen surface, abandoned after Miles hurried upstairs to answer what he described as a critical client phone call. The display illuminated when I accidentally touched it while cleaning dishes. What I discovered made my stomach sink. The message had been transmitted to someone identified as V, with a heart symbol beside the contact information. Victoria, his aide, the lady who had been staying late with him excessively frequently during recent months. I browsed upward through their exchange, my hands shaking. Months of communications, personal jokes, arrangements for after the separation, thorough conversations about how they would force me out of the company once this Gravora agreement was obtained, how he had been informing potential backers that I was merely the support staff while he represented the genuine intelligence behind the enterprise. The most heartless aspect? They had been mocking my commitment, about how intensely I had been laboring on this display, remaining awake until 3 a.m, perfecting each slide, practicing each discussion point, about how I remained unaware of what was approaching. Sweetheart, you should observe her rushing around believing this is her significant moment, one message stated. She remains clueless that tomorrow represents the day I finally eliminate the burden. Victoria had replied with laughing symbols and a message that inflamed my anger. Cannot wait to commemorate afterward. Simply you and me managing the operation. I detected Miles's footfall on the staircase. Rapidly, I positioned the tablet precisely where I had discovered it and acted as if I were filling the dishwasher. My thoughts were spinning, but my expression stayed composed. 8 years of matrimony to a manipulator had instructed me how to conceal my feelings when necessary. Is everything satisfactory down here? Miles inquired, embracing me from the rear. His contact, which previously provided comfort, now felt like a serpent wrapping around my shoulders. Flawless, I responded, reclining back against him with a grin that could have earned an Academy Award. Simply contemplating tomorrow. I feel so thrilled about our display. He held me more firmly. Our display. That is correct, darling. We will dominate it together. Together. What a gorgeous falsehood. The following morning came with misleading normalcy. I awakened at 6 o'clock as usual, completed my regular routine of stretching and meditation, then proceeded to our home workspace to conduct final preparation. Miles was already present, appearing refreshed and self-assured in his navy outfit, the one I had purchased for him during our anniversary the previous year. Important day, he mentioned, not glancing up from his computer. Are you feeling prepared? More than prepared, I answered, settling at my workstation. The display was uploaded on both our devices, backup versions saved to the internet storage. Each slide was flawless, each statistic confirmed, each argument solid. I had invested the previous 6 months investigating Gravora Group's difficulties, their rivals, their expansion forecasts. This was not merely a proposal. It represented a precise attack designed to address each concern they might possess. What Miles remained unaware of was that I had also invested the early morning hours conducting some extra preparations. A brief conversation with my separation lawyer, Rebecca Hayes, whom I had collaborated with on multiple client matters. A careful email to our bookkeeper requesting duplicates of all company financial documents. And most crucially, establishing a recording application on my device. I will prepare us some coffee, Miles declared around 9 in the morning. The session was arranged for 10:30 via video meeting. Gravora Group's management team would be participating from their main office in Seattle, alongside their legal advisor and 3 possible backers. I observed him navigate around our kitchen with the same effortless confidence he had always possessed. He was attractive, I would acknowledge that. Dark hair with sufficient gray at the sides to appear distinguished, green eyes that could charm anyone, a smile that had persuaded me to trust him with my heart and my future. But this morning, I perceived him differently. The manner he hummed while working, was he genuinely pleased about what he was planning to do to me? He returned with 2 identical black containers, his and hers coffee vessels we had bought during our honeymoon in Italy. The irony was not overlooked by me. "Here you are, honey," he said, placing my container down with additional care. "Consume it. You will require the energy." The coffee appeared and smelled ordinary. Dark blend, exactly how I preferred it. But his smile was excessively sweet, excessively calculated. I took a small taste and observed his expression. Was that satisfaction I noticed flash across his features? "Thank you," I said warmly. "You consistently take such excellent care of me." His device buzzed. "Victoria, undoubtedly. I need to use the restroom rapidly before we begin," he said, already moving toward the corridor. "Can you access the presentation? I want everything prepared to proceed." The instant he vanished, I sprang into motion. I exchanged our containers with practiced effectiveness, placing his in front of my computer and mine in front of his. Then I settled back into my seat, accessed the presentation, and waited. When he returned, he sat down without examining the container, took a substantial sip of what he believed was his uncontaminated coffee, and smiled at me with perfect oblivious satisfaction. The session was about to commence, and so was his destruction. At precisely 10:30, our computer display filled with faces. Harrison Webb, Gravora Group's chief executive, appeared in the primary window, a distinguished gentleman in his 60s with keen eyes that overlooked nothing. Next to him sat Jennifer Coleman, their chief operations officer, and Thomas Rivera, their head of business expansion. 3 additional windows displayed the potential backers Miles had been pursuing for months. "Good morning, everyone," Harrison said, his voice clear through our speakers. "We are enthusiastic to hear what Thornland Analytics has prepared for us today." Miles straightened in his seat, his confident smile securely in position. "Thank you for this opportunity, Harrison. Joanna and I have been laboring tirelessly to create something we believe will transform your operational effectiveness." I noticed he emphasized Joanna and I, ensuring to position himself as the leader. But as he reached for his coffee container to take another sip, I caught something else. A slight tremor in his hand. "Interesting. Before we commence," I interjected smoothly, "I want to acknowledge what an honor this is. Gravora Group's reputation for innovation precedes you, and we are thrilled to potentially partner with an organization that shares our commitment to excellence." The backers nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of respect and professionalism they expected. Miles shot me a quick glance. Was that irritation, or was the substance he had intended for me already beginning to affect him? "Shall we begin?" Miles asked, clicking to the first slide. "Our analysis indicates." He paused, blinking hard. "Our analysis indicates that Gravora Group faces 3 primary challenges in the current market landscape." His voice was still strong, but I noticed he was speaking more slowly than usual. Harrison leaned forward slightly, his attention fully focused. These were sharp business people. They would notice any sign of weakness or unprofessionalism. "The first challenge," Miles continued, "is operational redundancy across your regional offices. Our research shows." Another pause. He rubbed his temple with his free hand while reaching for his coffee with the other. "Shows that you could achieve 18% greater efficiency through streamlined processes." I watched the investors' faces. They were listening intently, but I could see subtle signs of concern beginning to form. Miles was stumbling slightly over words that should have been second nature to him. "The second challenge involves data integration," I said seamlessly, taking over. Your current systems operate in silos, which creates delays in decision-making and reduces your competitive advantage. As I spoke, Miles took another long drink from his container. The irony was exquisite. He was essentially poisoning himself with his own treachery. But I kept my expression neutral, professional. This had to look natural. Miles, would you like to elaborate on the technical aspects? I asked sweetly. He blinked several times, clearly trying to focus. Yes, absolutely. The technical aspects are quite complex, but essentially. His words were beginning to slur almost imperceptibly. Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. In the business world, this kind of unprofessional behavior during a critical presentation was career suicide. And Miles was about to make it much, much worse. Miles. Jennifer Coleman's voice cut through the silence as my husband stared blankly at the screen, his mouth slightly open. 20 minutes had passed since the meeting began, and what had started as subtle confusion was now becoming impossible to ignore. I apologize, Miles said, shaking his head vigorously. There's something. He reached for his coffee again, taking another gulp as if it might clear his head. The substance, whatever it was working exactly as he had planned it to work on me. The data integration challenges are significant. That was when Harrison Webb's expression shifted from polite attention to genuine concern. Mr. Wilkes, are you feeling all right? Perhaps we should reschedule, if you are not well. I saw my opening. Harrison, if I may, I said, my voice calm and professional. Miles has been pushing himself extremely hard to prepare for this presentation. He was up until 4 in the morning last night making final adjustments. Perhaps I should take over while he collects himself. It was a masterful move. I appeared caring and professional, while subtly suggesting that Miles's behavior was due to exhaustion rather than incompetence. But more importantly, I was positioning myself to salvage what he was destroying. That would be appreciated, Thomas Rivera said from his window. We are very interested in hearing the full proposal. Miles tried to protest. No, I'm fine. I can... But as he attempted to stand, he swayed slightly and had to grip the edge of the desk. The investors exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Please, darling, I said, standing and gently placing my hand on his shoulder. Let me handle this. You have done so much work already. To the camera, I added, I know every detail of this proposal as well as Miles does. We have been true partners in developing this strategy. What I did not mention was that I had developed 90% of it myself. Miles had been the presentation face, but I had been the brains behind every analysis, every recommendation, every innovative solution we were proposing. I smoothly transitioned to the next slide. As I was saying, your data integration challenges create a ripple effect throughout your entire operation. Our analysis of your third quarter report shows that information delays cost you approximately $2.3 million in missed opportunities. Now I was in my element. This was what I had been born to do. Take complex business problems and create elegant, profitable solutions. As I spoke, I watched the investors' faces transform from concern to interest to genuine excitement. Furthermore, I continued, clicking to a detailed chart I had spent weeks perfecting. Our proposed implementation timeline would have you seeing measurable results within 90 days, with full optimization achieved in 6 months. Harrison leaned back in his chair, clearly impressed. These metrics are quite ambitious, Mrs. Wilkes. How confident are you in these projections? Completely confident, I replied without hesitation. We have modeled these scenarios using data from 3 comparable companies, and in each case, our methods exceeded projected outcomes. Behind me, Miles was trying desperately to regain his composure. He had managed to sit back down, but his face was pale, and he was blinking repeatedly as if trying to clear his vision. The substance he had intended to humiliate me with was systematically destroying his credibility instead. This is impressive work, Jennifer Coleman said. The depth of analysis is exactly what we would hope to see. Thank you, I said, genuinely pleased. This project represents months of research and strategic thinking. We understand that you have multiple consulting firms competing for this contract, which is why we have gone far beyond surface-level recommendations. As I spoke, I noticed one of the investors, Margaret Torres from Calamore Partners, taking notes furiously. That was always a good sign. In my peripheral vision, I could see Miles fumbling with his coffee container again, clearly confused about why he was feeling worse instead of better. The beautiful irony was not lost on me. He had planned to watch me humiliate myself, to use my supposed failure as justification for pushing me out of our business. Instead, he was witnessing my finest professional moment while experiencing the very fate he had intended for me. But this was only the beginning. The best part was yet to come. If we could move to the implementation timeline, I said, advancing to slide 12, you'll see that we have broken the project into 3 distinct phases, each with measurable milestones and success metrics. Harrison Webb nodded approvingly, but his attention kept drifting to Miles, who was now gripping the arms of his chair as if the room were spinning. Mr. Wilkes, are you certain you do not need medical attention? This was the moment I had been waiting for. You know what? I said, as if the idea had just occurred to me. Miles, why don't you step away for a few minutes, get some fresh air, maybe splash some water on your face? I can handle the rest of the presentation. Miles looked at me with confusion. And was that fear? He was beginning to realize that something was seriously wrong, but he could not figure out what.
Yes.
Maybe that is a good idea, he mumbled, struggling to stand. As he left the room, swaying slightly, I turned back to the camera with a concerned but professional expression. I apologize for the interruption. My husband has been under tremendous pressure lately. He is incredibly dedicated to this project. Of course, Jennifer Coleman said kindly. Please continue. This presentation is fascinating. And continue I did. Without Miles's presence, I felt a freedom I had not experienced in years. This was my work, my expertise, my moment to shine. I moved through the remaining slides with precision and passion, addressing every question with detailed knowledge that clearly impressed our audience. Your competitive analysis is particularly thorough, Thomas Rivera commented. How did you obtain such detailed insights into Gravora Group's market position? 3 months of deep research, I replied honestly. I personally interviewed 15 industry experts, analyzed 5 years of market data, and conducted focus groups with your target demographic. This is not theoretical. It is based on real-world intelligence. I could see the excitement building in their faces. These were business people who appreciated thoroughness, and I had given them exactly what they were looking for. My phone, which I had set to record at the beginning of the meeting, was capturing everything. Not just the presentation, but also Miles's gradual deterioration and my seamless takeover. Evidence that would be crucial for what came next. Mrs. Wilkes, Harrison said as I approached the final slides, this level of preparation is exceptional. How long have you been developing these strategies? I have been working on variations of this approach for over 2 years, I said. When we learned about the opportunity to work with Gravora Group, I adapted and refined these concepts specifically for your needs. What I did not mention was that Miles had contributed virtually nothing to the strategic development. He had been focused on schmoozing potential clients at expensive dinners while I had been doing the actual work of building our business. The financial projections are compelling, Margaret Torres interjected, but implementation is where most consulting projects fail. How do you ensure successful execution? I smiled. This was where I truly shined. Accountability is built into every phase. Weekly progress reports, monthly milestone reviews, and quarterly strategic assessments. Plus, I personally oversee every major implementation step. You personally? Harrison asked. Absolutely. This is not a project we hand off to junior staff. When you work with Thornland Analytics, you get our senior-level expertise throughout the entire process. I was being careful with my language, subtly positioning myself as the primary resource rather than Miles, but I was doing it professionally, focusing on capability rather than making any negative comments about my husband. As we moved into the final phase of the presentation, I felt a surge of confidence I had not experienced in months. This was going better than I had ever dreamed. And the best part? Miles was missing his own professional destruction. The presentation concluded to enthusiastic responses from all participants. Harrison Webb looked genuinely excited. Jennifer Coleman was asking detailed follow-up questions, and the investors were clearly impressed by what they had seen. "Mrs. Wilkes, this has been outstanding," Harrison said. "I have to ask, is this level of strategic thinking typical of your work?" "It is," I replied confidently. "I believe in going beyond surface-level analysis to uncover the real opportunities for growth and efficiency." "How soon could you begin implementation if we move forward?" Thomas Rivera asked. "Immediately," I said. "I have already cleared my schedule in anticipation of this project. My full attention would be dedicated to ensuring Gravora Group's success." Again, I was careful to use I rather than we. Not inaccurately. I truly was the one who would be doing the work, but it was also strategically positioning myself as the primary resource. That was when Miles stumbled back into the room, looking even worse than when he had left. His face was ashen. He was moving unsteadily, and there was genuine confusion in his eyes. "How is everything going?" he asked, his words noticeably slurred. Now the contrast was striking. Here I was, delivering a flawless presentation with confidence and expertise, while he could barely form coherent sentences. The optics were devastating for him. "We were just discussing implementation timelines," I said gently, as if speaking to someone who is clearly unwell. "Why don't you sit down, honey?" Harrison Webb's expression had shifted to one of concern mixed with professional assessment. In the business world, reliability and professionalism were everything. What he was witnessing would raise serious questions about Miles's capability to handle a multi-million-dollar project. "Mr. Wilkes," Harrison said carefully, "perhaps we should continue this conversation when you are feeling better." No, Miles protested, trying to inject energy into his voice. "I am fine, just tired. Let me walk you through the final recommendations." But when he tried to advance to the next slide, he clicked the wrong button and accidentally closed the presentation entirely. The fumbling that followed, his desperate attempts to reopen the file while clearly struggling with basic computer functions, was painful to watch. "It is all right," I said smoothly, reopening the presentation on my computer and sharing my screen instead. "Technical difficulties happen. Here we go." I guided the discussion through the final points with professional grace, making Miles's struggles look like minor hiccups rather than major red flags. But the damage was done. These business leaders had seen everything they needed to see. As the meeting wound down, Harrison made a comment that sent chills down my spine. "Mrs. Wilkes, your expertise is exactly what we are looking for. We will be in touch very soon with our decision." Not your company's expertise, not Thornland Analytics' expertise. My expertise. After we ended the call, Miles slumped in his chair, looking confused and exhausted. "What happened?" he asked. "I felt fine this morning, and then—" "You have been pushing yourself too hard," I said with false sympathy. "Maybe you should go lie down. I will handle any follow-up with the clients." As he struggled to stand and make his way to our bedroom, I sat alone in our office, contemplating what had just occurred. The meeting had gone better than I had ever imagined. I had not only salvaged what Miles had tried to destroy, I had potentially secured the biggest contract of our careers. But more importantly, I had documented everything. The recording on my phone captured not just Miles's deteriorating condition but also his admission that he had felt fine that morning before drinking the coffee he had prepared. The trap he had set for me had caught him instead. And now it was time to spring a few traps of my own. Within an hour of the meeting's conclusion, I was already implementing the next phase of my plan. Miles was upstairs sleeping off whatever substance he had intended to use against me, while I worked methodically to secure my future and expose his betrayal. First, I called Rebecca Hayes, my attorney. "Rebecca, it is Joanna Wilkes.
We need to meet today.
I have evidence of my husband attempting to drug me, plus documentation of his plans to steal our business." "Joanna, that is a serious accusation. What kind of evidence are we talking about?" "Audio recordings, text messages, and witness testimony from a business meeting where he inadvertently dosed himself with whatever he had put in my coffee. Can you meet me at 4? Next, I forwarded the screenshots I had taken of Miles's text conversation with Victoria to my secure email account. Then I sent a carefully worded email to Harrison Webb. Dear Mr. Webb, thank you for your time today. I wanted to follow up personally on a few details from our presentation. As you may have noticed, my husband seemed unwell during our meeting. This morning's incident has made me realize that I need to address some personal matters that could affect our professional relationship. I want to assure you that my commitment to this project remains absolute, and my ability to deliver results is in no way compromised by these personal circumstances. I will be available by email and phone for any questions you might have. It was professional but hinted at underlying issues without being explicit. Harrison Webb was shrewd enough to read between the lines. Finally, I called our business accountant and requested an emergency audit of all company finances. I need documentation of who contributed what to the business, including intellectual property, client relationships, and financial investments. By 3 in the afternoon, I had also visited our bank and opened a separate business account in my name only, transferring the funds I could prove I had personally contributed to the company. The intellectual property rights were trickier, but Rebecca would help me sort through those. Miles was still sleeping when I left for my attorney meeting. I left a note saying I had gone to run errands and would be back by dinner. Let him think everything was normal for a few more hours. The irony was delicious. He had spent months planning to push me out of our business, thinking I was too naive and trusting to see it coming. But his own arrogance had blinded him to the most important fact. I had built this company. I was the strategist, the researcher, the one who created the solutions our clients paid for. He had just been the pretty face delivering my work. Now he was about to learn exactly what happened when you underestimated the woman who had made your success possible. At 6 in the evening, I returned home to find Miles awake but still groggy, sitting at our kitchen table with a cup of tea. The irony of him drinking something I had prepared was not lost on me, though this time it was just harmless chamomile. Feeling better? I asked, setting down my purse and affecting a concerned tone. I do not understand what happened, he said, rubbing his temples. I felt fine this morning, then suddenly I could barely think straight during the meeting. I probably ruined everything. Do not worry about it, I said soothingly. I managed to salvage the presentation. Actually, Harrison Webb seemed quite impressed with our work. Miles looked up sharply. Our work? Well, the strategic analysis we developed together, I said carefully. Though I did most of the talking after you started feeling unwell. I watched his face as the implications sank in. If I had successfully completed the presentation, then his plan to watch me fail had backfired completely. But he could not figure out how or why he had been the one to fall apart instead. Did they say anything about moving forward? He asked. Harrison said they would be in touch soon with their decision. I think we have a real chance. What I did not mention was the email I had received from Harrison just an hour earlier. Joanna, after today's presentation, I am confident that you are exactly what Gravora Group needs. Let's schedule a call tomorrow to discuss terms. I was impressed not only by your strategic thinking but also by your professionalism under difficult circumstances. The contract was mine. The business was mine. And tomorrow, Miles would learn exactly how thoroughly his life was about to change. As we sat there sharing dinner, him still confused about his mysterious illness and me quietly planning his downfall, I reflected on how poetic justice could be. He had tried to drug me into professional humiliation. Instead, he had drugged himself into obsolescence. The revenge was just beginning, but already it was more satisfying than I had ever imagined. 6 months later, I sat in my new office overlooking downtown Portland, reviewing the latest quarterly reports from the Gravora Group project. The results exceeded even my optimistic projections. We had achieved a 22% efficiency increase and saved them $3.8 million in the first phase alone. The divorce had been swift and decisive. Rebecca Hayes had presented such compelling evidence of Miles's attempted sabotage and planned theft that his attorney had advised him to settle quickly. I had retained full ownership of Thornland Analytics, along with our client list and all intellectual property I could prove I had developed. Miles had tried to contest the settlement, claiming he had been drugged without his knowledge. But when the toxicology report revealed traces of a mild sedative, something easily obtainable but requiring premeditation to use, Combined with his text messages plotting to remove me from the business, his credibility had crumbled entirely. Victoria had been terminated from her position the same week I had forwarded her inappropriate communications with my husband to her professional licensing board. The consulting industry in Portland was smaller than most people realized. Her reputation was effectively finished. I had expanded the business by 40%, hired 3 brilliant analysts, and secured 2 additional major contracts based solely on the success of the Gravora project. The company that Miles had planned to steal from me was now thriving beyond either of our original dreams. And it was mine alone. Sometimes, late in the evening when I reviewed my work, I thought about that morning 6 months ago. How he had handed me that coffee with such smug satisfaction, so certain he was about to watch me destroy myself. How he had never imagined that his own arrogance would be his downfall. The beauty of perfect revenge, I had learned, was not in elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. It was in simply allowing someone's own malice to consume them while you stepped aside and claimed the life they tried to steal. Miles had taught me one final valuable lesson: never trust someone who would poison your coffee. But more importantly, always make sure you know which cup is which. In the end, justice had been served in the most fitting way possible. He had drunk deeply from the cup of his own treachery, and I had inherited everything he had thought was his. As I looked toward the future, I could not help but smile at how perfectly the tables had turned in my favor.